We've all heard it. The flight announcement that sounds more like a performance than communication. This conversation cuts deeper than just the announcement at the airport. This conversation is about who we are, what we are trying to be, and what we are so afraid to admit. Sit tight as we discuss understanding the flight announcer with Mr. Azu Ishepene. It's nice to have you, sir.
Thanks for having me once again. It's a pleasure.
So, the flight, understanding the flight announcer, it's not just at the airport. So we're practically going to say that we're trying to understand every Nigerian out there who is trying to copy or mimic the foreign accent.
Yeah.
What made you write about this?
Oh, well, thanks again for having me. It was an experience I had. I was in Asaba last week, as I said. I mean, the week um, after I wrote my column on this. And then there we were. It's something I'd been experiencing, and I'm sure that which many people also experience. But I didn't pay particular attention until until this incident where I was at the airport with a colleague, and we were returning from Asaba, um, in South Nigeria on the local flight. And then it's a relatively small airport, and I thought the boarding announcement had been made, but I wasn't sure. Not that I was distracted. I mean, I was there, I was on my phone, but I could have heard clearly if the announcement was clear enough. But I knew an announcement had been made, and so that I sort of lingered a bit and waited. I saw a lot of people moving towards the boarding gate. So I asked my colleague with whom I was traveling whether he heard what the boarding what the boarding announcement was. And he said, oh, he thought it was the boarding to Ghana, to Accra, and Accra. I mean, I didn't know that the Asaba International Airport was big enough for us.
Accra.
So we waited again, and then we had something like a second boarding announcement, and then we stood up because virtually the entire departure lounge was, so heading towards the boarding gate, and we didn't want to be left out. And then we asked somebody in the line, please, what did the announcer just say? They said, oh, it's a boarding to Abuja. And my friend and I looked at him and said, "Hey, that didn't sound like Abuja." And of course, we laughed. And then we lined up. But that really was the trigger for me. Of course, on my way to Asaba and heading, I had the same experience at the Abuja airport. And it's not the first or the second or the third time, but the trigger was uh, my return my return flight to Abuja from the Asaba airport.
At what point does borrowing an accent stop being adaptation?
Well, I'm not a linguist, so but I think that you see, I mean, you mentioned this in your intro. People struggle, it's the wannabe sort of struggle. So the world in which we are exposed to all sorts of accents. Thanks goodness for social media and the ability to, communicate and engage and watch TV, experience people from other parts of the world on our phones or mobile devices. So I think sometimes we sort of either unconsciously or subconsciously want to speak like them. Um, I don't know why there are all sorts of reasons. There are all sorts of reasons have been given for why people sort of copy foreign accents. Some people say, well, it's a feeling of just an aspirational feeling. You want to be like people elsewhere, or it's a feeling of sometimes some people also say it's a feeling of insecurity. You not feel sufficiently secure in your mother tongue, but except perhaps you had spent a long time in some parts of the world and you were born and raised there, spent a long time. I do not think you can speak the way they speak, especially the owners of the language. Um, Not many Americans or British people can speak pidgin, I mean pidgin English, or speak my language the way I speak it. And if they even manage to speak pidgin or any other local language that we are familiar with, you also find that they come to it with some sort of accent. Sure. But I think the important thing is just be who you are. And I think that is sufficient for me.
Hmm. Talking about being who you are, we've had situations where in schools, in workplaces, people laugh at others that struggle with some mother tongue, maybe intonation, or
Mm.
can a society that laughs at its own natural accent ever truly value its natural identity?
Great question. I think again, this question, a matter of identity crisis, is one that people often struggle with. Who are we? Who are we trying to be? What do we want to become? How comfortable are we in our own skin and in our own natural endowments and giftings and in our cultural milieu and environment? Um, for me, if you look at someone like Chimamanda Adichie, in spite of her exposure and learning, and Chimamanda Adichie does not pretend to be anybody else than who she is. And you can hear her clearly when she speaks. The same thing with people like Professor Wole Soyinka. And there's so many of us. I'm just mentioning these two examples because they happen to come to mind. We can't, as I said earlier, we can't be like others. And there's something, even in Nigeria here, when we speak here, when we speak Pidgin, or when people communicate and they're from different parts of the country, you can almost certainly get a sense of which part of Nigeria they are from when they speak, even when they speak either in Pidgin English or. So, but I don't think it's something to be ashamed of. I think one of the most important and valuable things in communication is clarity. And that for me is fundamental. So if I was at an airport and I was waiting for a flight, and some flight announcer, because they are trying to speak like Americans or British, and they fail miserably to correctly communicate, and either I miss my flight or get into problems, that would not that would not be something that's
We've had fingers pointing at colonization as the very beginning of this problem in Nigeria. How deeply has it infected our perception of
well.
intelligence?
We cannot always blame colonization for the challenges that we have, because colonization obviously has its good and bad sides. All right. But Nigerians were not the only one colonized by us. There are other countries that were colonized as well. But I think, I mean, if you take a country like India, for example, India was also colonized by the British. But I do not see many Indians struggle to speak like Westerners. When they speak, you can almost certainly guess from their accent that they are Indians, but it makes no difference to them actually, or Pakistanis. You understand? So I do not think it is correct or proper to blame all of these things on colonization. It's also a matter of yourself sometimes.
Moving back to the airport, should we digitize flight announcements?
Oh, absolutely. I suspect that will help. I think that digitization or having display boards will help. I also think that if the airport authorities, the federal um, port authorities, aviation authorities, there are devices that can be installed to monitor quality. So at the end of each day, for example, you know who made what announcements and use it to monitor quality and also improve training and the quality of services offered. But I agree with you that digitization and digital display boards would also perhaps be other ways. But people argue that in a country where people are not number of literate, a number of people are not many people can read, and they also value announcements by announcers, by flight announcers. I've been on flights, for example, where the crew members made announcements, landing announcements, or departure announcements, welcome passengers, or sort of paid passengers farewell in Pidgin or on Ibon Air, for example, in Epic or something like that. And I sort of enjoy it. I'm not saying it has to be the done thing, the standard, but I think that it's not a bad thing, especially for domestic flights, to also explore other potential means of making the announcement.
What would it take for Nigerians to feel pride in our culture, our identity, and who we truly are?
I think leadership is important. I think people should also know that, recognize that every culture brings something that is truly unique and valuable to the world. So you have to take pride in what is positive aspects of your culture that add value to who we are as a humanity. We can't all be the same. I mean, I guess the beauty of the world in which we live in today is its shared diversity. And every culture brings something to the table. And you must recognize and value what your culture brings to the side and take pride in it.
It's nice having these conversations.
Thank you for.
You've heard it all. You've heard it all. There is nothing as good as taking pride in your identity and culture. Whatever you are, whoever you are, and wherever you come from, there is something unique about you. And that thing is what you should take pride in. Join us in our next episode. See you next time.
Conversations with Azu Ishekwele.